Hello. So, we just finished. Excuse me. Cough's getting much better. It's going away. I feel great. Just that lingering flu stuff. They said it could last up to 28 days. But it's just a very slight cough. Everything else seems good. My stomach won't shut up. Just keep. It's like Chewbacca. All right, this is part 2. They played cat and mouse as we said in the first video, because we. And I think that the 3 of them can't decide who wants to be the one to attack, because I believe that they want to be the one who turns the tide and attacks last, and kind of kills Caesar or makes him run or something like that. That's what it's appearing like to me. But the hell do I know? As I said, I have 2,000 years of armchair quarterback time to say, oh, well, he should have done this, he should have done that. I'm just a jerk reacting to this. So this is part 2 of the 17th video.
He also heard from some deserters that Varus, who had been stationed at Utica with the Optimate fleet, planned to attack them on the crossing. Immediately, Caesar rode to Thapsus himself, took command of his fleet, and surprised Varus. The Optimate fleet was chased away, and the Caesarian legions were guided to land safely. Caesar now felt comfortable enough to send 2 legions out of his fortifications to find supplies in the nearby estates. At this point, Optimate deserters informed Caesar of an ambush planned by Labienus, and Caesar managed to surprise his old ally, killing 500 light infantrymen and routing the Numidian cavalry. Unfortunately for Caesar, his lead.
That Labienus, he made a mistake in the last one where he came out and attacked, and then Caesar had cavalry come from behind. So I'm starting to wonder if this guy is just stupid. I shouldn't say that. Be nice, Kris. I mean stupid in terms of he's just certainly not on the level of Caesar, which is that's a bold statement for me to make, right? Because all these guys are. It's calling them stupid's not what I'm meaning to say. He's just. I guess I don't know how I'm trying to word it. Easily manipulated? I don't. The first one, though, wasn't really his fault. It was. But I guess they came around a mountain or something. But still, you got to be aware of these things. Anyways, I don't know how I'm trying to word it, so never mind. Ignore me.
Legions were unsuccessful in their foraging, making it clear that he needed to move his entire army to find food. Caesar left a garrison in Ruspina, burnt his camp, and marched out with his full force. He foraged the area around Agar and Seta, constantly shadowed by Scipio's army. After foraging around Seta, Caesar began retreating to his camp, roughly 23 kilometers away, but was once again attacked by Labienus and
Labienus really is going for. I'll tell you what, though, he ain't scared, because this is now the 3rd time that he's tried to attack. But he clearly doesn't have the soldiers. But he's not scared. I will give him that. He is, he's setting ambushes. He's doing a lot of things. He's just, I don't think, he's just not qualified to be in charge of a unit going against someone who's much better than him. Is that what I'm trying to say?
His Numidian cavalry and light infantry. This time, Labienus kept up the attack, retreating when Caesar's men turned to confront him, and then continuing the harassment as soon as they began marching again. Caesar's cavalry took the brunt of these attacks, and he was eventually forced to pull them from the rear and use his legions to fend off the Numidians. His heavy infantry took less damage than his cavalry, but his army was now moving incredibly slowly, only managing to cover 300 meters in 4 hours. Night finally set in, and Labienus withdrew his troops. But he had been successful in doing significant damage to Caesar's already much smaller cavalry force. Impressed by how effective Numidian light cavalry and light infantry had been against him, Caesar began drilling his men in tactics to combat them, such as how far to retreat from them and when they should turn and throw javelins. He was soon met by the last Sicilian reinforcements, bringing his force to 12 legions, 5 newly raised and 7 veteran, roughly 3,000 to 5,000 cavalry, and an unknown number of light infantry. Caesar's veteran legions had taken casualties, some might even be at only half strength, and so establishing the size of Caesar's army is difficult, but a number of around 60 to 70,000 seems reasonable.
Wow.
Though outnumbered overall.
That's more than I thought he had, so that's pretty impressive.
Caesar had more veterans than Scipio,
yes,
as the Optimate army was largely made of fresh recruits
and I didn't mean to cut him off, but I would say his veterans, with the skill that they have and the experience, that's the word, with the experience that they have, and the fact that they've fought together, it's not just the experience, it's also the experience of fighting together. That makes it tougher, because I mean, you don't really have to scream out orders to tell these guys what to do. They know instinctively. It's muscle memory, and that's difficult.
Conscripts. Caesar also brought elephants from Italy. Although useless in battle and intended for the Roman games, they allowed Caesar to train his troops. His men were taught where the elephants were vulnerable, even in armor, and his cavalry practiced throwing dummy javelins at them, familiarizing the horses with the elephant's smell and sound. It is a testament to Caesar's generalship that even on campaign he still took the time to train his troops to address new threats.
It's brilliant.
The stalemate continued. Caesar was moving from town to town looking for supplies, with Scipio shadowing him. Labienus attempted to keep up his skirmishing campaign while Caesar marched, but Caesar's training had paid off. 300 men from each legion were assigned to not carry any baggage and instead act as a quick response rearguard, fending off all of Labienus's harassing attacks. Finally, Caesar had enough. Time and again he had formed up his army for battle, only for Scipio to decline. The towns in the area that he raided were not important enough to force a reaction, and Labienus's attacks remained a constant source of frustration. Caesar needed to be able to force Scipio into a situation where he had no choice but to fight. So on April 4th, Caesar abandoned his camp at night and moved to Thapsus. Thapsus was a major city in the area, holding a large port, supplies, and arms and armor. It was a target that Scipio would not be able to ignore a threat to. Caesar, having marched through the night, soon arrived at the city, immediately besieging it and fortifying his own position against a possible Optimate attack. Outside of the city of Thapsus was the Marsh of Mocninae, which effectively forced any approaching army to take one of two narrow passages, hugging either the northern or eastern coast. Caesar had chosen his target well. He established 2 forts, one in the eastern passage, which was garrisoned by 3 cohorts, which effectively blocked that pass, and one surrounding the city of Thapsus. His strategy was to force Scipio to take the northern passage, meaning Scipio would be forced to attack him from only one direction. Scipio soon arrived on the scene. He initially intended to take the eastern passage, but seeing Caesar's fort, abandoned this idea. Leaving a small force under Afranius opposite Caesar's fort, he ordered Juba, Labienus and the Numidian cavalry to encamp in a separate camp nearby. He then commanded a forced march around the west of the marsh to the northern pass with the rest. It seems that Scipio's strategy was to try and catch Caesar in a pincer, hoping to eventually make a simultaneous push on his position through both passages. Quickly, Scipio ordered part of his men to begin construction of a second camp, while the rest of his army drew up for battle in front of them, with the elephants on either flank in front of his cavalry. Caesar could not believe his luck. Scipio had taken the bait and was now offering battle under terrible conditions. His men were already fatigued by the long march. Part of his army was building a camp, and a significant portion of his army, including most of the Numidian cavalry, was too far away. leaving 2 of the rookie legions encamped around Thapsus, Caesar eagerly formed up the rest for battle. He deployed his army in the classic 3 lines. The 10th and 7th legions were stationed on the right, and the 8th and 9th on the left. The centre was likely held by 2 of the other veteran legions, the 13th and 14th, with a recruit legion on either side of them. Mixing recruit and veteran legions like this was a favoured strategy of Caesar's. His last legion, the 5th, was split into 2 and stationed behind each flank, acting as a 4th line. Their role was specifically to handle the elephants. In case of a charge from them, the front lines would part and it would be up to the 5th to kill them. Archers, slingers and light infantry mixed with cavalry held his extreme flanks. Caesar and his men noticed a lot of movement and jostling in Scipio's line as men moved to and from the camp. His veterans, many of whom were already supposed to be retired and who had spent the last couple of months frustrated by the lack of a decisive battle, urged Caesar to attack. Caesar was hesitant, perhaps thinking that it must surely be a trap. It is also worth noting at this point that Plutarch claims that Caesar had an epileptic fit before the battle, which perhaps was the reason for the delay. His veterans, however, had had enough. A trumpeter of the 10th or 7th, without Caesar's orders, sounded the charge, and Caesar's right flank surged forward. Realizing that there would be no way of restraining his men, Caesar decided that he must fully commit and rode ahead to the 10th and 7th to take personal command of them. He ordered the slingers and archers on the right to target Scipio's elephants opposite them, panicking the beasts and sending them rampaging into their own lines. At the same time, the elephants on Scipio's right charged Caesar's left, but his legions quickly parted as they were trained to, the cohorts of the 5th Legion taking the brunt of their charge. They fought bravely, using spears to jab at the vulnerable and sensitive points on the elephants, blasting trumpets loudly to further frighten them. The elephants were soon panicked and turned to run back to Scipio's army. Scipio's line was now being charged by his own elephants, with Caesar's legions following close behind. Panic had set in almost immediately. The left, fighting Caesar's 10th and 7th, was the first to break, the entire line following shortly after. Some tried to fight, but most were stampeding towards the camp that was still being built. Caesar now had all the momentum, and his men easily cut down the fleeing and disorganized Optimate forces, as well as those who were constructing the camp. The garrison at Thapsus attempted to sally out to distract Caesar's army, but the 2 legions left in the camp easily repelled it. These legions then marched down the eastern corridor to the camps of Afranius and Juba. In a full-scale rout, Scipio's men fled around the western edge of the marsh, desperately trying to reach these camps, with Caesar's men in hot pursuit. It was a disaster for the Optimates. When Scipio's men reached the forts, they found Afranius' camp already overrun and Juba's being assaulted by Caesar's 2 other legions. The Numidian king, seeing Caesar's main force now approaching, gave up the fight and retreated with Labienus, Petreius, and what cavalry he had left. Caesar's force stormed his camp, easily taking it. Caesar's men massacred many. Dio blames this on Caesar. However, most sources say Caesar ordered the men be spared, but that his battle-frenzied soldiers disobeyed. It seems likely that Caesar did not order the massacre. A master propagandist, Caesar knew the power of mercy, and was renowned, even in his time, for sparing the vast majority of his Roman enemies. The battle was over. Some sources...
His soldiers had just went so long that now they were getting to fight, and they just wanted to kill. So, yeah, I could see that. They were just bloodthirsty. I see that.
Sources suggest that the Optimates lost 10,000, others suggesting as many as 50,000, while Caesar's losses were as little as 50 or as many as 1,000. It was a decisive victory for Caesar. Following the battle, the Optimate leadership was scattered. Labienus, Varus, and Pompey's son Sextus had managed to escape and would eventually make it to Spain, where they would continue to resist Caesar. Afranius, along with Faustus Cornelius Sulla, collected the survivors and began pillaging Mauritania, planning to gather enough supplies to then also cross to Spain. However, they were caught by Sitius and then killed. Petreius and Juba fled to Numidia, confident they would find support there. Sitius had been successful in defeating and killing Juba's general Sabura, however, and the Numidians now turned on their king, barring their gates to him. With no options left, the two men decided to commit suicide. They had a final dinner and settled on dueling each other, so that at least one of them may die honorably in battle. Juba won the duel, killing Petreius, and then had one of his slaves kill him. As for Scipio, he too hoped to retreat to Spain. Gathering a few supporters and a small fleet, he set sail, but was caught in a storm and forced to make port at Hippo. Caesar's fleet, commanded by Sitius, found him, and a minor naval battle was fought. When defeat here was inevitable, Scipio killed himself, the last Scipio of any real historical note.
Wow.
The only Optimate leader left in Africa was Cato in Utica. As Caesar's army closed in, he made his final preparations. He held a feast with his friends and then retired to his bedroom, leaving his children in the care of Lucius Caesar, a distant cousin of Caesar's, though a supporter of Pompey, telling his son, "I, who have been brought up in freedom with the right of free speech, cannot in my old age change and learn slavery instead." He then read Plato's Phaedra, and after finishing it, stabbed himself in the stomach. In death, Cato did rob Caesar of what would have been one of his greatest triumphs, that of being able to claim that he spared the life of his greatest enemy. Caesar was extremely frustrated by Cato's suicide, apparently saying, "Cato, I begrudge thee thy death, for thou didst begrudge me the preservation of thy life." Caesar spent some time in Africa, fining those who had funded the Optimate war effort, before finally returning to Rome victorious. He retired many of his oldest veterans in a generous fashion, and held 4 triumphs, one for Gaul, Egypt, Asia, and Africa. Having defeated Cato, his position was now supreme. He was assigned incredible powers by the Senate, including censorial powers for 3 years, and dictatorial powers for 10, a wholly unprecedented level of power. For all intents and purposes, Caesar was now the sole ruler of the Roman Republic. However, though he had now twice won the civil war, once at Pharsalus and once at Thapsus, the war was not over. The sons of Pompey, Varus, and Labienus still resisted him in Spain. More battles were to come, and we're going to cover them soon, so make sure you are subscribed.
I don't think he's really worried about the ones that fled to Spain. I mean, he'd love to get rid of them. At the same time, he'd probably love if they just went away, because then he doesn't have to worry about it. But I honestly believe that if they were to, send a letter, and they were just like, "Look, we don't want to fight anymore," I think he'd be like, "That's fine." He probably wouldn't welcome him back to Rome. You have to live in exile, which is, hey, it is what it is, but at least the war's over and you're alive. So that was good. I'm going to end it here. The next video that I do on Caesar will also be a 2-parter, because it's a 26-minute video. So I'm going to break that one down. Anything over 25 minutes. I'm thinking about dropping that down too. Only because, if I do a 15-minute video, well, if I did this whole video in one, the average view time is like between 6 and 11 minutes. So you get my talking and everything, it could be a 40-minute video. People are only watching 6 to 11 minutes. So I break them down. 15-minute video, I get maybe 8 to 12 minutes. So just makes it a little more, as I keep saying, digestible. So like and subscribe. I'm going to end it here. Thanks for watching. And thank you for your time. And thank me for mine.